Please rise in body or spirit and join me in singing hymn number 40. A hymnal, not the teal. The bells will be joining us as well.
Good morning, and welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Ann Arbor. I am the Reverend David Pyle, and I am not one of the ministers of this congregation. With Reverend Manish Mishra-Marzetti on sabbatical for a few more weeks, I get the pleasure of being in worship with you all this morning. I serve our Unitarian Universalist faith tradition as the regional lead for the Mid-America region of the Unitarian Universalist Association, our denominational body. Our association of over 1,000 congregations and 185 of those congregations here in the Mid-America region. So I have many of the responsibilities that other traditions might give to a bishop without the title, authority, or cool clothing choices. Although I do get the blessing of visiting many of our Unitarian Universalist congregations for workshops or trainings or even for Sunday morning services like this one. It's good to be with you all in Ann Arbor this morning, our largest UU congregation in Michigan, which has been part of the community in Ann Arbor since 1865. I and this morning's worship team welcome both those in person and those online to this sacred time and place. If you're visiting us online, we would love for you to introduce yourself in the chat and to fill out a survey at UUAA.org/newcomer survey so that we can get to know you a little better and know how we can connect with you. For those visiting us in the sanctuary this morning, we would also welcome you and would love to connect with you after the service during our newcomer welcome in the Redmond room immediately after the double doors. It's just outside the double doors, the first room on the left. There will be a sign, "Don't trust my directions. I'm new here. There is a sign, and there will be someone to answer questions and to get to know a little more about you. And I do not get to meet visitors to our congregations very often, so I would also love to say hello. I would like to remind everyone that Ramadan begins this coming Monday and Tuesday, and to offer blessings in this time for our Muslim siblings in faith, both within Unitarian Universalism and beyond. And as Ramadan is a celebration of the first revelation of Muhammad, let us call into our hearts the times that we may have experienced, such moments of transformative awareness, of epiphany, and of awakening. Let us make space here together as we are gathered in community. We are gathered for worship.
Every week as we gather, we light our chalice, the symbol of our faith. Indeed, we do so at many of our gatherings. From memorial services to board meetings, small group circles to day-long retreats. Our chalice casts its light over us, bringing us together with intention and purpose. The flaming chalice glows steadily beside us and within us in all that we do. And for some as yet unknown to us, it is a beacon shining in the distance, the light that will guide them home. Though its steady glow may not call to mind the sudden flash of epiphany, let us imagine for a moment the flame flaring up, a bolt of pure light illuminating those last few steps to our door. Let us shine our light wherever we are and everywhere we go. If you are watching online, I invite you to light your own chalice or candle and share your location in the chat so all may see the reach of our faith. This morning, Brenda Cole will kindle our flame here in the sanctuary, and I invite Brenda to join us now. Our chalice lighting words speak of the depth, the reach, and the meaning of our flame. Please hold these words in your heart as we say together, we light this chalice for the light of truth. We light this chalice for the warmth of love. We light this chalice for the energy of action. We light this chalice for the harmony of peace. Thank you, Brenda. Another ritual binding us together with purpose and intention is our recommitment, week after week, to our covenant. Lacking a fixed creed, our faith is grounded in the covenantal promises we make to each other. To speak our covenant together is to renew the vow that roots us in love and peace as we journey together. Whether you have done this 1,000 times or it's your first time, let us breathe new life into these words each time we speak them. Together, let us say, the spirit of this church is love, and service is its law. This is our covenant with each other, to dwell together in peace, to search for truth in love, and to help one another.
The time for all ages doesn't only happen at this point in our Sunday services. There is another time for all ages that happens usually once a month on a Friday, and so we call it Friday Fun Night. This coming Friday, the 15th of March, there will be the next Friday Fun Night starting at 6 p.m. We will be celebrating the vernal equinox with food and activities and crafts, and including a sing-along around a campfire, assuming it's not covered with snow, along with the best food for all ages ever, s'mores. There are links to RSVP and to volunteer for the event in the weekly news and in the SGD bulletin. Now, religious institutions are one of the few remaining places that actively encourage and foster intergenerational interactions. So think about that. How important it is what we do right here to make opportunities for that to happen, whether it's Friday Fun Night or the YRU service coming up at the start of April, or these moments every Sunday. The story, our time for all ages. Have you ever had a realization about yourself, something big or even something small that surprised you? And then you realized you didn't quite know what to do with it, and you weren't sure if this realization might change everything? Well, whether that's happened to you or to someone you know, I'm pretty sure you'll be able to relate to the story I'm now going to read for our time for all ages. It's called Not Quite Narwhal by Jessie Sima. Kelp was born deep in the ocean. He knew early on that he was different from the other narwhals. His tusk wasn't as long as everyone else's. He had different tastes in food. And he wasn't a very good swimmer. But his friends didn't seem to mind, so Kelp decided he wouldn't either. That is, until he was swept away by a strong current. I wish I were a better swimmer. Kelp found himself at the surface, closer to land than he'd ever been before. High up on a cliff, he spotted a mysterious, sparkling creature. It looked so familiar. It looked like kelp. Kelp swam towards land as fast as he could, which wasn't very fast at all, hoping that he could catch up with the creature that looked just like him. When he finally reached the shore, Kelp felt a little bit nervous and a little bit anxious. He had never left the ocean. He was nervous about walking for the first time, but the land creatures made it look so easy. Oof. It wasn't. Ow. Eventually, he got the hang of it. Everything on land was strange and beautiful, but also kind of scary. Kelp began to think he might never find the creature that looked just like him. But as he stumbled out of the forest, land narwhals actually were unicorns, and by the looks of it, so are you. Kelp had never heard of unicorns before. They taught him all sorts of new things about his tusk. We call them horns. Wow. They introduced him to unicorn delicacies, and they showed him how to gallop. There was no doubt that Kelp was, in fact, a unicorn. He was having so much fun that he didn't want to leave. But then he remembered all of his friends under the sea. Kelp missed them terribly, so he said goodbye to the unicorns and returned to the ocean. Come back soon. Kelp swam toward home as fast as he could, which wasn't very fast at all, hoping that the narwhals would still like him now that he was a unicorn. When he finally arrived, Kelp had butterflies in his stomach. Welcome home, Kelp. Kelp took a deep breath and told his friends the news. It turns out I'm not a narwhal. Of course you aren't. I'm a unicorn. We all knew that. They took it quite well. Kelp was happy to be home, but now that he'd experienced life on land with the unicorns, he couldn't seem to forget them. Did he want to be a land narwhal with the unicorns, or a sea unicorn with the narwhals? Kelp couldn't decide. But then he realized that maybe, just maybe, he didn't have to choose. The end. You could say Kelp experienced his own narwhal epiphany, a realization of who he really was. And it did change many things, but not everything. He remained beloved by both of his families. It is my hope and my prayer that if you are listening and wondering if you are loved, that you will really know that you are. And it matters that you are who you are. Whether not quite narwhal, not quite unicorn, or maybe completely unicorn. It matters that you are here, and I want to be sure you hear this, that you are beloved. So now, let us sing these lovely words to close out our time for all ages, words that remind us we are not alone as the children get ready to follow or lead your teachers out of the sanctuary to your classrooms.
Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. For your people are my people. Your people are mine. Your people are my people. Your divine, my divine. Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. For your people are my people. Your people are mine. Your people are my people. Your divine, my divine. Your people are my people. Your people are mine. Your people are my people. Your divine, my divine.
There are moments in some services where the minister has the task of sharing staffing news with the congregation, and this is one of them. Some of you have read the email that was recently sent with our latest staffing announcement. But if you have not seen it, I want to share that Mike Halerz will be stepping back from his paid staff position as technology coordinator as of June 2nd. Now, the very good news is that Mike is not moving away or leaving us. Mike will get to be a congregant again, who doesn't have to sit in that very same chair every week, and he will be someone who volunteers to help run tech some Sundays. And there's a lot of room on that team if you want to join him in that new role in the fall. Now, if you have even the slightest idea of how Mike works, you know he will be deeply involved in training more volunteers and helping with the hiring of a technology coordinator to take on much of what he was doing. And that process will begin next month. You know he will not leave us stranded without sound or video or slides or music or microphones or assisted listening devices or cameras. We can anticipate a seamless transition for when he turns over that chair back there in June. Please do read the emailed announcement if you want some more details. So this really is just to get you ready for the transition. Mike is still here, he is still working, and we'll thank him and celebrate his contributions in an appropriate way later in June. And for now, the thing he really wants is for me to stop talking about him so we can get the offertory slides ready.
I think often about our offering practice, in no small part because I am frequently up here banging the drum. What exactly do I mean when I tell you that our offering is a spiritual practice? How is what we do here different from, say, loading coins into a parking meter? A spiritual practice is undertaken with intention and purpose. It feeds us in some special, perhaps even transcendent way. Just as when we light our chalice or speak our covenant, we are acting from our heart. We are about as far from autopilot as you can get. An offering is not transactional. If you are thinking, what's in it for me, you are asking the wrong question. In the words we will soon repeat, we dedicate our lives to the work of this congregation, our very lives. This is a far cry from any quid pro quo. Our giving, in other words, is aspirational. When we offer up our time and our treasure, we are giving to our future selves and to the future that extends beyond ourselves. We are feeding the dreams we hold for a more just, more equitable world, a world spared from the ravages of white supremacy, climate disruption, war, and the alienation and isolation of our present age. Today's offerings will go to the programs and ministries of our congregation, the very programs dedicated to fighting these ills. There are a number of ways for you to participate. You may text UUAA to 73256 or visit uuaa.org/giving and select weekly offering for the fund. Or you may indulge your analog old-fashioned side and drop cash or checks into the baskets. However you choose to give, thank you for your generosity. I invite the ushers to please come forward as this morning's offering is gratefully given and received. Thank you, bells. As our ushers now come forward, I invite you to rise in body or in spirit as you are comfortably able. And let us speak from our heart as together we say, to the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives and these our offerings. Thank you. You may be seated.
So I invite you to take a deep breath with me. Become comfortable in your space, sit back. Eyes open or closed as you wish. But I want you to think back to a time when you had a realization. Maybe days ago, maybe decades ago, but when something just became apparent to you that had not been apparent before. Some new insight about yourself, about others. Some moment of epiphany when the eyes became clear and something became a part of your world that wasn't before. Where were you? What happened in your body? What did it feel like? What does that aha moment feel like for you? What feelings did it inspire? Was there hope? Was there fear? Did you share it with anyone? Did you tell anyone that realization? Try and recapture the feeling of that moment for a few moments of silence.
Today's reading is from Conjectures of a Guilty Bystander by Thomas Merton. In Louisville, at the corner of 4th and Walnut, in the center of the shopping district, I was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all these people, that they were mine and I theirs, that we could not be alien to one another even though we were total strangers. It was like waking from a dream of separateness, of spurious self-isolation in a special world. As if the sorrows and stupidities of the human condition could overwhelm me now that I realize what we all are. And if only everybody could realize this, but it cannot be explained. There is no way of telling people that they are all walking around shining like the sun. Then it was as if I suddenly saw the secret beauty of their hearts, the depths of their hearts, where neither sin nor desire nor self-knowledge can reach. The core of their reality, the person that each one is in God's eyes. If only they could all see themselves as they really are. If only we could see each other that way all the time. There would be no more war, no more hatred, no more cruelty, no more greed. But this cannot be seen, only believed and understood by a peculiar gift.
Though he is not here this morning, and he better not be watching online, I would like to thank Reverend Manish, my dear friend, and the staff of the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Ann Arbor, Congregation of Ann Arbor, and the board of this congregation for inviting me to be back in this pulpit this morning. I counted up, it was almost exactly a year ago I got to be with you all. In a Sunday morning worship. As your congregation's primary contact on the staff of our association, I often try to plan to be with a congregation for something just a couple of weeks before the end of a minister's sabbatical, just in case there have been issues while the minister was away. Challenges that have arisen, or maybe even conflicts that have occurred. But when I met with your congregation's board a couple of weeks ago, we discussed that this time of sabbatical has actually gone really well. That the congregation has had a time of growth and learning with your sabbatical team, with the ministers that have been part of the coverage plan for this time. I will tell you it was one of the most intentional coverage plans for a sabbatical that I have ever seen. And that there really, so I am grateful that this has gone so well during this time. It doesn't always. And now I do want to say though, that's not an excuse for you all to get fussy with each other in these last few weeks before Reverend Manish comes back. We discussed how the congregation seems to have avoided some of those challenges. So I just want to say, well done. But this has made this one of the rarest of occasions for me as UUA staff, a time when I just get to come preach a sermon. You don't know what a joy that is for me. And to preach a sermon where the senior minister did not tell me what I was supposed to preach on before I got here. If you didn't know this, most of the times I preach is because someone has told me what they want me to come talk about. I counted it up. I don't know that I have actually done a sermon that I chose in the 10 years that I have been on UUA staff, other than in my military ministry. And Reverend Manish could not tell me this one because he is on sabbatical and better not be watching online. So, joy. It's just so much fun to be here with you all this morning. So about 7 years ago, I was presenting a workshop in a congregation on the Delaware seashore. This congregation was growing and was trying to let go of what we church consultants call family model church dynamics, and to try and become a pastoral model church. Or in other words, in family model church dynamics, the congregation, most of the activities are led by and are done by and are coordinated by a group of lay leaders, a small group of lay leaders. And the shift from family model church to pastoral model church is really having a called minister who coordinates all those things together as the minister, not a group of lay leaders doing that coordination. One of the dynamics that often happens in these small family model congregations is that over time, decades, one or two of these lay leaders will have been in that coordination and approval role for so long that it becomes difficult for anything to happen in the congregation without the approval of those one or two lay leaders. In church theory, we often call these individuals matriarchs or patriarchs, or as I have learned, it has a gender-neutral term, periarch, which I really like. In the workshop, I put up a PowerPoint slide behind me, and I had the dynamics of, matriarchs and patriarchs and periarchs on that slide. And I was talking about how in a small congregation, it's often one or two people that have to make all the decisions and approve all the things that happened. And about halfway through this section of the workshop, I heard a loud, wait a minute, come from the middle of the room. One of the more seasoned members of the congregation, an older woman who was one of the congregation's most dedicated leaders, turned to the other members of this congregation and said, "Am I the matriarch of our congregation?" Silence. More silence. Then one of the other members, a close friend of hers, said to her quietly, "Well, what do you think?" After another moment of silence, the matriarch of the congregation said loudly, "Well, I think I probably need to quit doing that," to some laughter in the room and relief as well. I spoke with her afterwards, both that day and several times later, and that moment really was an epiphany, or a moment of spiritual realization for this wonderful UU lay leader. She loved her congregation, and she loved being involved in everything. She loved being trusted by them. She was a founding member and had been an important part of the process of buying a new building and building a new sanctuary onto that new building in the most visible part of town. Part of why they were growing. She was loved and trusted in the congregation, and in that moment, in that workshop, she realized that for the congregation to continue to grow, she would have to let go of some of what she loved. And her relationship to her congregation would have to change. She would have to let go of knowing who she was in the congregation and make room for a new way of being with them, a new identity in her faith community. When I asked her later why she thought the epiphany for her happened in that workshop and not at some other time, even years before, she said that she thought it was because the congregation had needed her for so long. but now with new leaders and so many new members and a newly called, ordained minister, she'd begun to realize in that moment that they did not need her as much as they used to, that she could let go and everything would be fine. She did, and it was. That congregation is even larger today than it was then, and it is still growing. And I have to say, I am proud of them. Now, they do have the benefit of being a congregation on the Delaware seashore, and if you don't know, retirement income is not taxed in Delaware. You know, they have all of our credit card money, so they don't really need it. But so they have, that's another reason why that congregation is growing. But it's also that she, this wonderful member of the congregation, was able to have that moment of awareness about her role in her spiritual community. And because of that, she was able to hand off the leadership she had held for so long, and to do so with intentionality and love because of that moment of awareness, because of that epiphany. So I've been fascinated by this concept of epiphany, this concept of spiritual realization, since before I went to seminary. One of the first sermons I ever preached, and I'm going to tell you, it was not a good sermon, but one of the first sermons I ever preached was a story of 6 moments of epiphany, of that kind of spiritual awareness awakening in my own life. As a military chaplain, I have seen these amazing moments of awareness happen for my soldiers and for their families. When something falls away and their perspective shifts, one of the regular times is when a soldier comes back from deployment, from being overseas, and realizes that their family has figured out how to do everything without them, and that they need to find a new way to be part of that family. I have seen this kind of spiritual awareness happen in hospital rooms as a hospital chaplain with people who receive a diagnosis that changes the entirety of their understanding of themselves and the world. And I really saw this kind of spiritual awakening, this kind of epiphany happen when I was a hospice chaplain in Chicago, working with patients and families near the end of life. And I think those in part were because we knew there was a time limit for people to have those realizations about each other and their relationships with one another that they couldn't have if they waited much longer. I've seen epiphanies like this, spiritual awakenings happen in congregational ministries, both among ministers who talk to me as the regional lead, but also with congregations, and even in the occasional workshop or two done by the UUAA staff, although those are really rare. If you have an epiphany in a workshop, it's not the workshop that's doing it, it's you. I will say that there was one that I really loved, besides the one on the Delaware seashore. I was teaching a workshop on family systems theory. Anybody know a bit about family systems theory, how the roles we play in families, that we interact them with each other? And so I was teaching a role about how family systems theory can help explain how people treat each other in congregations. Think about that for a second. And one of the people in the workshop, about halfway through, stood up at the back of the room and just shouted, "Now I understand my mother." Epiphanies happen everywhere. In our reading this morning, Trappist monk, writer, theologian, and mystic Thomas Merton wrote about an epiphany that he had standing on the corner of 4th and Walnut in downtown Louisville, Kentucky. I don't know if any of you all have ever been there, but there is now a historical marker. You know what I mean by historical markers? Now a historical marker at the corner of 4th and Walnut saying that an epiphany happened here. I just love that. That he had the realization that his monastic life, his practice, his, as he put it, spurious self-isolation, had placed a barrier between himself and other people, and when that barrier came down, he was overwhelmed with this feeling of love for others. That moment changed his life and his monastic practice, inspiring writing and correspondence on issues of social justice and world peace that have led many others to their own realizations and epiphanies. And I will also tell you, it led to some real angst between him and his abbot, who really wanted him to stop talking to people about these radical ideas he'd had at the corner of 4th and Walnut. I believe that there are two ways that we often experience these kinds of epiphanies, these kinds of radical realizations. When we intentionally make room and space for them in our lives, and when we don't. Sometimes they seem to happen at random moments, and sometimes they seem to come at us in moments of crisis. Thomas Merton, I think, had prepared his entire life for that epiphany in Louisville. Through meditation practices, through writing, through being part of community, he had built up and made room for that realization that happened on a street corner in Louisville that day, not knowing if it would ever come or what that realization would be. Another Catholic priest friend of mine, a military chaplain, once said to me that one of his epiphanies was the day he realized that his understanding of God seemed to hate all the same people he did. And that changed his life. But there is a kind of privilege that's built into being able to do that work, to make the space, to be prepared for that kind of epiphany in your life. I know it's true that many simply cannot take the time to make room for spiritual revelation with all the busyness and the business of life, moving from one decision or crisis to the next, from the next email to the next email. It's often difficult for us to make space enough in our lives for these kinds of realizations. This is one of the reasons why ministers of UU congregations are often granted the ability to take sabbaticals. A sabbatical is not just a time for rest and renewal, although that is a part of what it means for a minister to go on sabbatical, because the work of church is a more than full-time job. But it's also a time for the minister to move away from the business and the busyness of ministry and to make the space for epiphany, for new spiritual realizations and revelation. The average span of most ministries in Unitarian Universalist congregations right now, the average is 5 to 7 years. I have wondered about that number. And one of the reasons I think that the average span is between 5 to 7 years, that a minister moves on to a new ministry, is because amidst the busyness of ministry, it can be difficult to make space for those new epiphanies, for those new revelations. This is part of why most congregations grant sabbatical about every 5 to 7 years, so that the minister can make space to bring back, to do that new awareness. Yet there is another aspect of making room for epiphany when it comes to a minister's sabbatical. And that is for the congregation to have made space for that renewed ministry as well. A minister can have, and I tell you, I've lived this experience with them. They can have an amazing sabbatical experience that was full of new realizations and revelations, that was deeply transformative, and that they were ready to bring back to the congregation through renewed ministry and messages and sermons from the pulpit. And yet when they return, What the congregation wants is 3-month late answers on the budget process. Answers to every email that has been sent during this time. And why the leaky sink did not get fixed the entire time you were gone. There is a space of the congregation welcoming a minister back from sabbatical that is about making room for Epiphany, making room for those new messages. As Reverend Manish returns from sabbatical, how can you intentionally welcome and make joyful room not only for his return, but also how do you make room in your own heart, in your own life, so that you can be transformed by the renewed ministry that he will bring back to you, that you will form together? Can you let go of knowing the ministry that has been enough to welcome the shared ministry that is to come? In my wife's Zen Buddhist tradition, there is this concept that the Dharma, or wisdom, or Epiphany, that it's always there, that it is always waiting in every moment. And the work of our work is to make ourselves ready to connect with it, is to give ourselves the space to connect with that wisdom. That the source of Epiphany is there in every moment. And another colleague put it a different way. UU minister and president of the Star King School for the Ministry, the Reverend Rosemary Bray McNatt, once said at a conference I was at, "Once God has a message for you, it just keeps coming until you listen." I said earlier that there were two kinds of epiphanies: those we have made room for and those we have not. The realizations that inspire such moments of transformational awareness, I believe, are around us all the time. Sometimes we have made room to connect with them, made room for them. We have made space. But often, they come to us during moments of crisis and challenge, when our barriers of already knowing come down not through intentionality, but through changes in our survivability. And in those times, we're not prepared to listen. As a military hospital and hospice chaplain, and as a parish minister, and as UUA regional staff, I've been honored to bear witness to both of these kinds of realizations. The ones that we have made room for and the ones that come unbidden in moments of crisis and challenge. Both can be transformative. And yet when we have made room for Epiphany, when we have the space in our lives to welcome that which is new, when we can be present to wonder because of an acceptance of what we do not know and a humility about what we think we know, it is then that we can best be present to such moments of spiritual awareness and the transformation they may bring. And as I was reading this sermon to myself after writing it, I had my own little epiphany, my own little moment of awareness. And that was, this was probably the sermon Manish would have told me to preach anyway. So may it be, blessed be, and amen.
Our closing hymn is number 158 in the gray hymnal. If you open to that page and look at the bottom, you'll see a notation that this hymn was commissioned by this congregation for our 125th anniversary. The music was written by our former music director, William Albright, to words by Thomas Traeger, who was a prolific hymn writer. He wrote over 400 texts for hymns. So as you sing this today, think about how relevant these words still are 3 decades after it was written. So will you rise in body or in spirit and join us as we sing the next hymn?
passion for discerning how the world has been designed. Let the sense of wonder flowing from the wonders we survey keep our faith forever growing and renew our need to pray. Source of wisdom we acknowledge, that our science and our art and the breath of human knowledge only partial truth impart. For beyond our calculation lies a depth we cannot sound, where the purpose for creation and the pulse of life are found. May our faith redeem the blunder of believing that our thought has displaced the grounds for wonder which the ancient prophets taught. May our learning curb the error which unthinking faith can breed, lest we justify some terror with an antiquated creed. Praise for minds to roam the heavens, praise for strength to breathe the air, praise for all that beauty leavens, praise for silence, music, prayer, praise for justice and compassion, and for strangers, neighbors, friends, praise for hearts and lips to fashion, praise for love that never ends.
As we go forth, I ask you to hold in your heart the idea that Epiphany is there all the time, that wisdom is in every moment, and our work is to make space to connect with it. Let us go forth into the world creating peace. Amen and blessed be.